welcome to SIIMcast, a podcast brought to you by the Society for Imaging, Informatics, and Medicine.
Welcome to our annual recap and/or fun with the SIIMcast hosts on semi-informatics topics. So we have Mohammed, Alok, and Jason. Ali may or may not join us based on clinical workflow, and Arjun was going to join us, but unfortunately he got called in on emergency stuff for work last night and is asleep. So he will try to join us another time, and hopefully he'll be taking part in some of the things we have going on for the annual meeting. Jason, Mohammed, or Alok, one of you want to talk a little bit about what we're planning for the annual meeting this year?
Yeah, for sure. So the annual meeting this year, for anybody that's not keeping up with the news, is actually going to be a hybrid affair. And it's going to be both in person and virtual. With that, there's actually equipment on site that allows for live broadcasting, both for the conference, but we're also going to piggyback on that and use that to record some episodes, some of which will actually be available live and some of which will be recorded and aired at a different time, right from the annual meeting. I'll stop talking here. I'll give it to Jason.
Yeah, no, I filmed in front of a live studio audience, so it should be really good. We'll have an opportunity to hopefully connect with a few individuals that we've had challenges getting on the show. We're hoping to be able to target a few of the fellows, and we've got a few surprises that should be interesting. So yeah, I'm really excited for that. Welcome, Ali.
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
I guess as we think about the past year, was there any episode that jumped out for anyone? Or we've really tackled a lot of episodes, I think significantly more than we've ever done. I could go first. It was one that I didn't participate in, and I wish I had. I was hoping to. It was the AI racial identification. It was a really cool episode. You guys did a great job on it. That one stood out for me. I really enjoyed listening to that as a listener. But what about the rest of you guys? Anything that jumped out?
You did all the homework. You set it up. You got all the questions rolling, and then you had a work emergency where you couldn't make it. So we ended up taking the credit for it. But it was definitely a great episode. Honestly, in hindsight, I feel like we've had a great year. We've been cranking out episodes at an unprecedented rate. I think we're now far enough from COVID that we could reuse the word unprecedented safely, right?
Yeah.
There was a time when that was like a forbidden word. Just stop saying it. The PERT series, of course, that was, I think, also your idea, Jason. That was a really good one, too. Really good episodes. I've also enjoyed setting up episodes about topics that I personally find extremely intriguing. Of course, I stand out as a geek here, so maybe they're not super interesting to everybody. But for example, the one we had that we talked about pathology was a big eye opener for me. I really enjoyed taping that one.
Yeah, I think the two things that were the biggest highlights collectively, the chapter episodes where we meet with the authors and editors and get to not only dig into some of the sort of more interesting questions about those topics, but also get their insights on things that aren't necessarily in the chapters, but are related to the theme. It gives you a really cool insight. And I think when you go back and read the chapters, it actually makes everything a little bit more exciting, a little bit more salient. So I love that. I think that was great. One of my colleagues is actually preparing for his exam. So I got to, dust off my first edition and take a look. And when you have heard the author speak, the words take on it, I think, a new meaning. It's hard to describe, but it's real. And then the other thing that I thought was awesome was the open community meetups discussion. Just the idea of the bringing people together from all different walks of the sort of informatics realm. I loved hearing about the chats, the discussions, and the insights and resources that get shared there. I thought that was great.
I'm kind of curious to see if they actually had an increase in membership after the episode, because I'm sure a lot of SIIMcast listeners would be interested in taking part in some of those discussions and learning from people all across the country on that sort of thing. Might be interesting to circle back with them and find out about that. I think one of the episodes that stands out in my mind, just because of the personality, is the one with Herman. I haven't interacted with him very much at the conference, and getting to interact with him on these episodes, he's a very dynamic individual. He's funny, great sense of humor. So I'm hoping to at least have some conversations with him at the conference this year. get to know him a little bit better, because he clearly knows a lot. He seems like a pretty cool person to be as a friend,
And as someone who's relatively newer to the field and getting to, meet everyone and the fantastic sim kind of members that we've had on our show, Herman, it turns out I didn't realize we're down the street from each other. And I had no idea that he was in the same city. So I think these episodes are a great way to even just open those doors and to get to know more of the community. And kind of going back to the PIRT, I mean, as someone who, from the trainee standpoint at least, it's just great to be able to see what the authors were thinking, what they had in mind, and what they really wanted us to take away before we go back to the chapter and kind of approach it with that perspective. So looking forward to having more of those. I know we have a few more, so it's going to be exciting to see. Each one has its own flavor, its own personality, and that'll be an exciting, I think, continuation going forward.
How have you found it, Ali? Because you've come in new this year, and how is it transitioning in from listener to co-host as a part of Simcast? Because you've transitioned in very seamlessly. It's as if you've been here the whole time. So
very kind. It's been great. I remember listening to, I can't remember, I think I was telling Mohammed that I used to listen to Simcast as a medical student, right? Getting into informatics, learning what's new, what's up and coming, what some of the thought leaders are thinking. And so to be able to have the privilege of speaking to them directly and picking their minds and learning from everyone, it's just been fantastic. And I think that this is a fun group. This is fun. You asked my wife, what's one of the more exciting hobbies and more fun times I've had during this year? It's got to be Simcast. She sees me with my new gear and I got a new mic. You can kind of see it here. And she sees me geeking out over that. So it's rubbing off a little bit, which is nice. But it's been great.
I was struck by how quickly and how much you've been able to contribute to the podcast, not just the logistics, but also the interviews and the discussions and the publicity. You've really done a great job and very quickly become a valued part of the team. I am curious. I did want to sort of turn the tables and ask you a couple of questions. As a trainee going through it, and sort of been exposed to the subject matter, has this changed any of your thoughts about where you see yourself in the incorporating your informatics skills into practice? Has it giving you ideas? I'm curious to know.
No, absolutely. And, I think part of it is a learning process. I think when we talked about this earlier on, I think when I was first joining was, a big part of Simcast is being able to learn from each one of our guests and from each one of our speakers. And so that's been a big part of it. And for me, it's been opening my eyes to so much of informatics I just didn't realize was there. And so going forward, I start seeing this role, hopefully, of someone who can work with this multidisciplinary audience, right? Because we've had MDs, we've had informaticists, we've had a whole host of individuals. And part of that for me has been trying to see, where do I fit into that picture and how can I contribute, as you kind of mentioned. I think that hopefully I can be almost like a bridge and ambassador between the medical field and imaging informatics. I'm kind of working with that team to guide future solutions, to guide problems and have some of this exciting technology kind of directed in the right way, essentially. But honestly, I watch you guys and learn. I try to do, okay, how's Prasant asking questions, right? What's his style? What's Jason thinking about right now? What's Mohammed going to ask? That kind of thing. And that kind of inspires me to form my own questions, my own kind of intellectual curiosity.
It's a dangerous question to wonder what I'm thinking.
My mind is very easy to read. I'm always the guy who asks questions related to open source software. So anytime if I'm not there, that's all you got to do. Just find a question related to open source software.
For the record, every time I listen to an episode, thinking about what to say for the intro, almost invariably when I'm thinking to myself, I wonder about open source, that's when you pipe in. So just know that we're on the same wavelength as far as keeping that consideration in mind. That's always near and dear to my heart as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So Alok, we were talking a little bit about Ali coming on and changes and whatnot. So you've kind of changed your role with the group a little bit. How's that been for you?
Well, so I guess there's two sides to it. Obviously, I was sad to have less of a direct participation and getting to work with you guys, co-hosting the episode and being a closer part of the process, mostly because of, the time difference, but also because the other positive part of it is that a lot of it's because my work responsibilities have grown tremendously. So I've taken on a lead role in our new PACS transition, and I've been given protected time. 20% of my time now just goes towards that, meeting with our vendors, our project leads. So as a result of, I guess, being given this opportunity, I'm seeing a lot of great opportunities, but it does sadden me that I haven't had as much time to be part of the gang, so to speak. And working asynchronously, while it's great, I still feel like I'm in touch. It's not quite the same. So, as my participation becomes more and more asynchronous, it's just sort of a bittersweet part of it, but it's still been fun and rewarding. And I'm still learning every episode, many, many new things. So I'm enjoying that.
I don't want to put you on the spot, Alok, but this PAX transition, I don't know how much you can speak about it or not, but is it a PAX replacement? Is it happening just at your institution? Is it across the region? I know we had discussed once you were interested in image sharing. And
so, that's another part of it too, that actually we are two sort of separate components of it. So one has been the process of dealing with, so the long story short, without going into details, is that the PAX vendor acquired another product, and basically instead of having an incremental upgrade, we ended up having to do a complete overhaul. That put us back into the RFP process. So I got to experience that, firsthand. Ended up switching venues to another vendor, and now we're in the process of basically planning all of that out. We're trying to do like a top to bottom systems integration. So working with our EMR folks. This is actually really exciting, introducing, in addition to our protocoling workflow, doing like a vetting workflow where certain requests are either directly routed based on intelligent rules in terms of who's ordering it, in what setting, whether it's something that they know they're ordering or should be ordering, and sort of fast tracking those requests, and then creating a safety net so that if, say, for example, someone who's ordering something outside of their expertise, we can catch it, evaluate the request, either send it back to be refined or just immediately protocol it and then send it into our scheduling queue. So introducing some more advanced, business streams and workflows. And the vendor we've been working with has been really great with accommodating us, and I'm getting my hands dirty every day. So it's been a lot of fun. But yeah. And then on the second part is trying to be a leader in the region and participating in an imaging exchange, a regional imaging exchange. We already have a lot of infrastructure set for almost all other aspects of the EMR to be integrated between sites, but imaging is like one of the last frontiers. So trying to leverage the relationships that are already there or deciding to go in a completely different direction is sort of where we're at right now. And those discussions are ongoing, but it's challenging, but it's fun. It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
So we need to make sure we pencil in or pen in your experiences for an episode coming soon, because that seems like something I want to personally hear more about that too. So maybe I'm a little biased, but that would be an exciting topic. Absolutely.
It's really interesting. I mean, we were just talking about, the chapter episodes, and a lot of things, you read, and I think on a very superficial level, they're like, yeah, they're intuitive, they make sense. But if you take it and then sort of think of it through the lens of an experience that you've had, I think the nuances, the challenges that might come up become a lot more salient. And so, our go live is at the end of the summer, and I'm sure I'll have lots of, little tidbits to share in terms of, well, the actual reality of certain things is a little bit more complicated, but it really changes the way that you think about a lot of these things.
Yeah. And especially since the group of us is mostly North America, otherwise regulatory, very different. In Canada, they have more of a provincial identifier, right? So here in the States, I don't know for where you're at, if they have something similar to, a master patient index kind of thing, right? So that changes what paths you're going to take. You don't have it, changes what paths you're going to take just at base. So there's so many questions that this is a very interesting kind of thing that you're going through. Yeah, it'd be an amazing, it'd probably end up being like a 2-hour, 3-hour episode just going through it from start to finish, because there's so many different aspects to this, between not just the PACS, like you said, you're integrating with the EHR. You're also trying to do this regional image exchange. I'm surprised they don't give you more than 20% time. Geez, this is a lot.
To tie it back to SIIM, I was just going to say the virtual program, they have a global track this year. And so there's going to be different image sharing experiences from different regions. So I see on the agenda, there's the European edition. I believe there's going to be a Middle Eastern edition. I think Monif is taking the lead on that one. We're going to be sharing something from Canada as well. What you've touched on, Prasanth, is really interesting, is how the governance affects how the technology is going to flow. There's the privacy rules, there's how patients are going to be identified, but ultimately it's all fun stuff.
Yeah. Things like GDPR have been really it went into law a while back, but now we're starting to see a lot of changes in the website. So how does that affect the technology and the products look like and how they work and things like that? And as other regulatory things, like I believe California was looking at a very similar law to the GDPR. I don't know if it actually went through or not, but I'm sure other countries are doing something similar. That's on top of the privacy. So, does that affect your regional image exchange or, other health exchange processes in some ways because it's traveling over the same tubes, right?
This also reminds me of one of the big kind of factors that I find insightful for SIIMcast is that with this dynamically changing field, I mean, things are changing so fast. Now we're starting to interact at a global level, as you mentioned. I feel like the benefit of this podcast and really listening to this podcast is being able to keep up with it and really knowing what's, at least having an idea and some kind of start to go for a deeper search. So I think it's really exciting that we're doing this, and that really looking forward to covering more of that actually at SIIM and seeing what that global program has in store. Because it sounds like this is the first time we're doing that, right?
Last year during the annual meeting, didn't they do some amount of global tracks where I remember some sessions early morning? Yeah, they did. I don't know how deep it went into different aspects. I was able to catch one or two of them. The brain's been a sieve these years. So yeah, I remember it being on the schedule at the very least.
If I remember correctly, I think last year there were about 3 sessions. And then this year, I think the scope has expanded quite a bit. I didn't count how many, but there's definitely more than last year.
For sure. Yeah, actually, I do remember specifically because we were having this episode chat last year. You guys asked me if I was participating in the Middle East discussion. And that was actually how I found out about it. And then it was through that session that I got in touch with Munif and started learning about the HIMSS language report translation subcommittee. So yeah, that's been steadily growing. And I look forward to seeing the offerings this year.
That brings up an interesting question. Is this HIMSS translation committee also looking at translation to lay reports? Or is it just translation to other languages? And is it other languages in lay report terms, right?
Sometimes with all that jargon, a lay report itself is a different language. So
yeah.
Yeah, actually, so I've attended maybe 2 or 3 meetings much earlier in the year, and it was actually just those very 2 topics, because you can't talk about translating reports without considering the level of the language. And, we talk about code switching and other contexts of the language that you use to report to a specialist versus, giving a patient results, and so that is very much a part of it. And then to add on to that, the complexities of spoken communication versus written communication, the use of third parties like translators, either in person or over a telephone, a lot of those can really introduce all kinds of complexities, not just in the comprehension of patients, but also, like, for example, if you're doing it in the middle of a procedure, how the process of if I'm trying to tell the patient to swallow and I'm doing an upper GI and all the barium is now, obscuring their duodenal sweep, I didn't get there in time, so being able to prepare patients, communicate with them, all those aspects that are touched upon in those discussions, it's really interesting.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was also live. I thought it was mostly just report translation. I didn't realize that they're also looking at live communication. Oh, that's fascinating.
As far as what all those discussions, what they'll culminate in terms of either recommendations or a white paper, that I'm not certain about, but all of those are at least considered in the talks.
It's interesting that you're talking about like verbal and written and whatnot. And for Mohammed and Jason being in Canada, where you have 2 official languages, right? French and English. But the French that's spoken in Canada is not French that's spoken in France. And even within France, you have Parisian French, which is in general what is taught as quote unquote French in French classes. But you go to other parts of France and it's not Parisian French. And now you come to Canada, that's not Parisian French at all. I mean, yes, there are some basics that are the same, but there are a lot of parts of it that are different. So now we run into the problem of, well, are you actually communicating correctly? Oh, this becomes a fascinating problem.
Yeah, I remember reading something about how French that's in Canada, it's, I don't know if this is the right way of putting it, but it's more pure in the sense of it dates back to the 1600s. There's been a lot more protection laws about the language, so it hasn't been as impacted by the English. Whereas in France, you'll see le coq and, a lot more subtleties of English seeping in. But yeah, interesting. Yeah, those subtle differences. I'm curious, although, is structured reporting, is there much adoption of that in your region? Because that would definitely help with translation as things are more structured.
Yes, templated structuring. So it's really interesting because I think it becomes very clear. So it's sort of in the landscape, you have a bunch of different hospitals with varying degrees of public and private funding. And many of them have opted for various reasons to tie up with Western institutions, whether they're European or US. So the two big institutions here are Cleveland Clinic and Mayo. And the relationships between the hospitals here and the hospitals in the States are also different in terms of not just the degree of oversight, but also the sort of desire to establish a certain culture, like a clinical culture. So for example, our structure, the way our institutes are all set up, is very much mirroring how things are done in the US. And as a result of that, we've inherited a lot of practice. Many of our department chairs were initially brought over from Cleveland to staff the institutes, and then as they have grown, some of them have slowly repatriated. But as a result of that, they've established, I think, a certain culture. And the reporting is a perfect example of that. You will see such a variety in terms of the styles. As an institution, we've tried to use the standardized templated reports, use of codes within reports, drop-down lists to keep things as precise, as reliable, repeatable. And it's funny because, you could think about data mining, you could think about clarity of communication, you could think about eventual translation, you could think about billing, and all of those are sort of strong reasons to embrace the strongly structured and templated style of reporting. And yet there's still quite a bit of variety across the landscape here. I think it's kind of similar still in the US, but yeah, that's kind of the state of how things are.
Interesting. Mohamed, you've been doing the consultant thing now for some time. How has that been rolling for you?
Pretty good. I cannot complain. It's been very rewarding. So, my career choice here was by design. I'm a person who likes to multitask and work on multiple things, and this is kind of how it's been. So the job has now allowed me to work on even more projects than I was able to fit into a full-time job description before. I'm still lucky to lead the SIIM Hackathon, which is, of course, happening the week before the annual meeting this year. I've also been lucky to have been called upon last year to help run the AI demo at RSNA, so the Imaging AI in Practice, and very lucky to have been called back again this year. I don't know why they called me back, but they did. So we're just about to get it rolling right now. And of course, another person who's deeply involved and more like a superstar of the demo here is Ali. He's the face on the featured YouTube video for the RSNA AI demo. Ali, you want to say something?
Oh my gosh. I'm riding along your success, man. It's all you and Terry Schmidt, the hard work that you put in to make that reality, to see how we can use AI in practice was inspiring. And just to be able to be there to absorb everything y'all were saying, showing me, was a privilege itself. So by no means, my friend, that's all you. And I'm excited to hear that you're back there. I think that they're very lucky to have you, and congratulations. I know we talked about the SIIM Hackathon a little bit, and we had a really successful year last year, right? With multidisciplinary groups. And what are some of the roles that you saw from the SIIM members in the hackathon?
It's a good question. So the way the hackathon works is we've kind of figured out generally like a formula that works really well for us. The formula, of course, has changed over the years, but the core of it is mostly staying the same. So first of all, we always say that the hackathon, in this case, focuses more on education and collaboration over competition. So there is some degree of competitiveness, but it's not your typical hackathon that's all about winning. In this case, we want to make sure that we get everybody a great experience. So what we do is we have a number of prominent SIIM members who serve as mentors at the hackathon. And we have two sets of mentors. We have mentors that we call code heroes, who are more on the technical side, and the mentors who are more on the clinical and maybe workflow side that we call domain experts. And those mentors actually help people who come to the hackathon, which, by the way, are usually from all walks of life. Most people tend to think that hackathon is for developers and people who code. It's not. We actually have a lot of residents and people who are interested in informatics come to the hackathon who have no coding experience. Anyway, so we match all these people, and then, we have this brainstorming session where we all geek out. Here's the word again. We talk about, this is what I hate about radiology. This is what I'd like to fix about radiology. And then people go away and, build over a couple of days, and then they show off their work at the end of the hackathon. So I hope that answers your question as to kind of what it looks like and how it works.
The past 2 years have been virtual, and this year we're going back. Is there still a virtual aspect to this hackathon in addition to the live aspect?
So the hackathon is actually still mostly virtual. There are some live aspects that will take place at the annual meeting, but very small in comparison to the hackathon itself. To be honest, what we've realized is that the hackathon being virtual and also slightly decoupled from the annual meeting actually works in the hackathon's favor for two reasons. Number one, the fact that it's virtual means more people can attend who normally have difficulty being able to afford attending. Students, people from less fortunate countries, so on and so forth. Also, the other thing that we heard from people who did attend SIIM and attended the hackathon is that it can be really hard to be at SIIM and maximize your SIIM experience while also doing the hackathon. Even though we try to keep the hackathon relatively simple, so it's not taking up too much of your time, it still is a competing priority. So if we do it the week before, it's a little bit more simplified for people to be able to attend. So yeah, the bulk of the hackathon this year, and as far as we can see, going forward, it's probably going to be virtual. We're still trying to bring something into the annual meeting to keep a connection, for awareness. So this year we're going to have some presence close to the poster area, and we're inviting anybody who is attending the hackathon who happens to be attending SIIM to also join us for a social event happening there. But yeah, the bulk of it is virtual.
I just wanted to add, I remember the last meeting that I had attended in person, I think in Pittsburgh, and I saw all of the participants, kind of huddled around their tables. And all I kept thinking to myself is, man, this looks like so much fun, but they're missing the whole conference. It actually is nice that you can kind of have both. You can participate in the hackathon and then still actually enjoy all the great sessions and, other aspects of the conference. So I think that's actually a really nice thing that's been done. And I'm actually looking forward to participating as a mentor in this year's hackathon. I think that'll be fun. If I may, I wanted to actually pose a question to the group. Just curious to know, obviously we put our content out for the community, and I think we all learn a great deal in the process. You guys have any experiences or anecdotes you could share about things that you've picked up, learned, during our discussions, you've brought back to your own practices and seen the fruits of those insights? Any stories you guys want to share?
So being at an academic center now, I have the triple mission of clinical work, research, and education. So on the education front, actually, Jason was kind enough to give a talk to my trainees about standards. And every few slides was, and here are some SIIMcast episodes about these standards so that they can go in and dig into more information. So that was a perfect example of bringing that information in. But also, like Ali was talking about, being kind of more up to date on what's going on. So when things come up, I can be like, oh yeah, we just talked about this the other day, or I remember an episode, I know what's going on with this. We recently restarted our grand rounds and had Judy talking about her paper. So I made sure during one of our journal club sessions for the informatics trainees to include that paper so that we could talk about it. And then they would be able to ask her questions, right? And I said, well, okay, we've got an episode on this too, so you can listen to that so that you could really drill down into some nice specific questions. And how often do we get a chance to talk to the author on a lot of these things, especially such an amazing paper like that? One, the fact that they went through so many different things to try to figure out what the cause is. They could have easily said, oh, we don't know, and throw their hands up, right? But they actually really took the time to say, okay, could it be this? Could it be that? And the other interesting thing is it's a living paper. They're doing more research, trying to figure it out and adding to it as time goes. So it's not static knowledge, if you will, right? It's not a static document, static paper. That's also a fascinating concept with respect to, like education. Like, can you imagine a text when we were printing textbooks? Yeah, that's it, right? But could you imagine a live textbook that changes over time? There are some difficulties with that too, I understand. But it really changes the way that you look at knowledge and you look at education. So those are a couple examples from my side of things. I'd love to hear what other people have, other than Jason with his shameless plugs, if he's got some other things for us.
I know for me, it's been really nice where sometimes we're confronted with a challenge, and SIIMcast provides an opportunity for me to contact people that I otherwise probably would never have the access to. So things like within the region, patient identity is a challenge where we operate a health information exchange for the purpose of sharing information. But things like Judy's paper on racial identification, it's interesting to see where that could potentially go as a means of patient identity. Because if you're able to identify the race, and if you were able to look at the pixel information in addition to the metadata, it's interesting. I've been chatting with some of the vendors here about opportunities of what they could do with that. And it's interesting. So more along those lines, and thinking back a couple of seasons where we had a topic about the gender harmonization project that's underway and what happens when a patient transitions, and if the imaging informatics solution doesn't allow their gender to change, what is that going to result in for the patient? So, the opportunity of being able to get a hold and chat with people that otherwise I don't think I would have ever been able to have a chat with. So
I'll offer a bit of a different perspective then, because from my perspective, we've really gone into education, and I think we have 4 of the greatest teachers right here. So we've actually incorporated SIIMcast as part of our ongoing AI and informatics education. So this is an official supplemental resource that we use, because I think each episode of SIIMcast is jam-packed with so much knowledge, and a lot of it practical knowledge and kind of exciting up-and-coming knowledge. So we've kind of worked that into our efforts for ongoing AI and informatics education. So hopefully, the extent of that legacy and the scope of your lessons. The other thing, though, is, going back to the workstation, right? As someone reading studies, we use AI tools in practice. We use solutions on a daily basis. But before SIIMcast, I never really thought about what's going on in the background. What's the infrastructure that we're using to support this? Now I've started looking deeper into that and understanding what really goes into interoperability. What is interoperability? How does it manifest in the clinical scenarios? How can we actually support multiple algorithms? How do you support algorithms running at the same time? How does that connect with the rest of the information system? So for me, there's definitely this big practical aspect where I'm starting to ask questions that I wouldn't have asked before, honestly. And the more I learn, the more questions I have. So it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, that's cool. Mohamed, what about you?
I've been thinking the whole time as you gentlemen were talking, and it's very hard for me to come up with specific examples, but I mean, it goes without saying, Prasanth, you remember, I was a quote unquote groupie for many years. I would come up to you at SIIM and Arjun at the time to say how much I love your work. Of course, when Jason joined the team and, the first time I heard him on the podcast, I was like, hey, I know this guy. And it just brought it closer to home for me. And, at some point, one of you asked me, hey, would you like to join? And I said, yeah, absolutely, would love to. To be honest, the biggest thing I love about being a host on SIIMcast is the fact that I get to be on pretty much every episode. Whereas in the past, sometimes I'd fall behind because I would mostly get to listen to the podcast when I'm traveling somewhere. So that would be my listening material. Now I'm there pretty much every time I record an episode. I don't feel like I'm far behind on keeping up with what's going on. But every type of episode we do has its own fascination for me. I'm not clinical, I'm technical. So when I hear clinical guests talk about their experience and their challenges, it's an eye-opening experience for me. But likewise, when we have technical guests who maybe talk about things like standards and new profiles, it's also an eye-opening experience for me because it's not always easy for me to keep up to date with these things. There is no real central mailing list that gets you that information, not the way that SIIMcast works. So it's just, again, it's really hard to pinpoint a specific example, but for me, it just works across the board. And of course, I can't forget the other type of episodes sometimes we do is when we interview personalities like Herman Osterwijk and others, and the stories they have to tell, the anecdotes, and, Rick Wiggins, his episode was just absolutely brilliant. So it's just so much fun. That's all I can say.
That's awesome. So with the top of the hour, and I can stay on, I'm on academic day, and this is part of my academic pursuits, but I know you guys have other stuff to do in life. So annual meeting, personally, I am super psyched to see everybody face to face. I owe several people beers, including everyone that's on this call, or other adult beverages or other beverages of choice for those that don't drink beer or whatnot. But nonetheless, Are there any sessions you guys are moderating, presenting, or any sessions that you're particularly interested in?
I do have a number of sessions at SIIM, but I do not want to be selfish and give shameless plugs to my sessions. I will talk more about what I'm looking forward to. So one thing I love about the hashtag Team SIIM, as they refer to themselves, so the SIIM staff, is they never rest and they're always looking to try new things and they're always raising the bar. So I looked at the program for this year and I'm already very excited to see all the new things they're trying. So for example, in the middle, they're having this informatics tech day with a bunch of tech talks. Brilliant play on words, but also the content looks really interesting. So I'm very excited about that. The expansion of the international aspects of SIIM are also very exciting to me. Honestly, just being back in person. Don't we all just miss that experience? I may just be walking up to people and touching them just to make sure they're real, just because it's been that long.
Jason, what about you?
Yeah, I'm going to be participating with one of the virtual sessions on image exchange. So myself, the chief radiologist at University Health Network, and someone that operates the Montreal McGill DIR, we're going to be sharing 3 perspectives on image exchange in Canada. So I think that should be an interesting session to be part of. And then I'll be helping out. I'm actually filling in for Don Cram, who won't be able to make the meeting this year, for the update on the data standardization working group for the HIM-SIM community. We've done a lot of work there, and I'll be providing kind of our latest updates on that. But overall, yeah, I would align my comments with what Mohamed said. I think the thing with SIIM that's really remarkable is they are never stagnant, and the team is always looking for dynamic new ways to engage their audience. And it looks like a very dynamic program. I'm excited, and I'm excited to see people in real flesh. That's going to be something else. Yeah.
My number one goal is to attend as many sessions as I can. And I know that's ambitious, probably not even get close to it. But I think one of the main things that caught my eye as I was going through the program guide, at least, was we're going beyond radiology and just imaging informatics here. We're looking at, well, I guess we're staying in imaging informatics, but we're looking at AI in ophthalmology, dermatology, pathology. And I'm a big believer in learning from their experiences, right? And seeing if there's anything that can translate here or how we can communicate and maybe collaborate. So this is fantastic. And I think that there definitely is hopefully more of a trend of going towards this enterprise imaging and seeing really how we can work together, or, even how radiology can maybe fulfill a role in their pursuits. So I know we're going to be in Florida. We're going to be, close to Disney World, but I don't think Disney World is going to be the most magical place on earth at that point. I think we might be giving them a run for their money. So excited for that.
It's true. It's true.
I was going to say I'll be joining virtually with you guys, but rather than a top pick, I have a prediction. I was reviewing a few abstracts for the submissions, and it's amazing. It's startling. By far, the majority is about machine learning and artificial intelligence. And I think that's going to be ever increasingly present at the meeting. And I'm sure you guys will see that bear out to the point where even talks that don't necessarily traditionally you would think of as incorporating it, I think are going to have some point of discussion about integration of AI or ML into decision-making pathways or workflows or load balancing of systems. Who knows? But I think it's going to become more just pervasive.
Yeah, for sure. And as much as that happens, we also have to remember like all the other aspects of stuff that we do, right? It's not all AI machine learning. We still have to talk about building teams and leading and what's the latest with DICOM and what are we doing with HL7 and this and that, other things that, especially like information security, that's becoming bigger and bigger of a problem all the time, right? Like, so keeping up with those things are just as important, even though AI, like you said, Alok, it's getting a lot of spotlight right now, and that's fine. But one of the things I think we do well in the podcast here is that, yes, AI is big, machine learning, deep learning, all that stuff, but we're also trying to balance all the other things as well and not focusing too much on that. And I think we do a pretty good job of trying to make sure we're bringing information about other aspects of informatics to our listeners. I'm definitely going to be interested in some of the non-radiology imaging stuff, cardiology, pathology, ophthalmology, some of those sessions as we're going through our PACS upgrade here. We're going to be getting a VNA. We already have talks with DermPath about sharing slides and or visible light images, and they have huge challenges that we are lucky to not have to deal with, like white balancing and all sorts of stuff with visible light. And I was, listening in on a session last year about derm informatics, and I was just like, oh my God, these are huge mountains to scale. I'm like, wow, I'm glad where we're at, but what are we going to do to help? We can bring our knowledge base to bear and our problem solving ability. So hopefully we can keep making headway and keep lines of communication open to help each other out. Like Ali was saying, learn from each other. I do have a both in-person and virtual session. I guess it's Thursday morning. I didn't realize it was right after the opening session, talking about new metrics for RFP and contracts. And it should be interesting. I'm moderating. I get other people to do the dog and pony show. I don't have to be up there talking too much, thankfully.
One last comment I'll make is, I was thinking about, we've talked about multimedia reporting, and I'm seeing, there will be some sessions on that as well. So I'm interested to see, I think we have recent studies showing patient satisfaction or, examples of how video reporting or even integrating some form of multimedia to help make a report more friendly, if you will. So I'm interested to see what the more technical specifications are to make this a reality and what are some of the challenges. And I'm hoping we'll touch more on that.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else have any other closing thoughts or anything we want to talk about before we're done for the session? Well, I'd like to thank you guys for all the hard work over this last season. Like you guys said, we've done a ton of recording and we're just cranking out episodes, and it's awesome to see. And the nice thing is, with that increase in volume, I don't think we've had a drop in quality, which can sometimes happen. Sometimes it's hard to come up with questions, good questions to ask and try to dig in. But I think between all of our experiences, we're able to ask good questions and be creative about it. I know we joke with Mohamed, like, oh, of course, he's going to ask about open source, or Jason's going to ask about standards, right? But in all fairness, those affect all aspects of what we do, of course. But, we're all still able to come up with other good questions and try to dig in. And I think we also make our guests think, not just formulaic stuff. We're asking questions so they actually have to think about and try to give good answers so that we are getting into this topic and providing good episodes and value. So I want to thank you guys a lot for your hard work over this year and in moving into season 6. It's hard to believe we're going into season 6.
Big pat on the back, guys.
Right on. All right. Well, thanks again for another season, not just episode, another season of SIIMcast. And we will see everybody down in Florida that we can see. If we don't see you there, well, we wish you luck as well. But please feel free to come up, talk to any of us. If you're interested in taking part, we're happy to have you. If you've got ideas for podcast episodes, we are always listening. We're excited to try to incorporate those things. And even if you want to be a guest host, we've had several guest hosts on. So if you'd like to host a single episode without getting onto the team full time, we can make that happen too.
I was just going to say, and Prasanth owes you a beer, likely.
Yeah, probably. I know Arjun's already said you owe me a beer. I'm like, okay, I owe you a beer. And of course, thank you to the SIIM staff. They've been super helpful with everything, and we wouldn't be here without the SIIM staff and the SIIM leadership supporting us. So yeah, looking forward to it.
You're here.
We will see you next time.
SIIMcast has been brought to you by the Society of Imaging Informatics in Medicine. Please visit our website at SIIM.org for more information and educational content, including webinars and an archive of prior episodes. Please follow us on Twitter at SIIM_tweets. Thank you to our listeners for your continued support.